Hello and welcome to the Doc Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike DeLuke, and it's my mission to help you lead a happier, healthier, and more prosperous life, both personally and professionally. Hello and welcome to this 100th episode of the Doc Podcast. I honestly can't believe that we're at 100 episodes. As some of you may know, this all started about 2 years ago with me asking my wife, Renee, how I could get my message out there. Her response was, you should start a podcast. And as they say, the rest is history. So even though I like to joke and tell everyone it was my idea, I want to thank her for her good idea, as well as for her constant love and support as I've embarked on this amazing journey. I'd also like to thank all of my guests, every single one of you. You make the show, and you are the reason for its success. I am constantly amazed by the willingness of others to give of their time and knowledge by coming on the show and sharing their stories. It's been so much fun getting to know and learn from so many amazing people, and the relationships and friendships that have emerged as a result have made it even more rewarding. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank you, the listeners. Without your passion and support, the Doc Podcast would not and could not exist. Not an episode goes by that I don't feel blessed that you take the time out of your busy lives to listen to this show. I promise to keep working hard to bring you great content that will continue to help you live a better life, both personally and professionally. Here's to the next 100 shows. And for this 100th episode, I have the pleasure of being joined by two guests, Doctors Lynda and Krystle Dean-Duru, board-certified pediatric dentists and a powerhouse mother-daughter team practicing pediatric dentistry in Ashburn, Virginia. They have an amazing story and are doing tremendous work as they push the envelope and challenge the norms of traditional pediatric dentistry. One of the things I love most about their holistic approach to patient care is that instead of focusing on treating the disease, which is what we've all been trained to do in this profession, they look for the why in an effort to reverse the disease process and proactively prevent further damage and destruction. And they do so by connecting the mouth to the rest of the body in order to determine the story that the mouth and teeth are telling us about the child's overall health and well-being. Then, once the underlying etiological issues are detected, they use a comprehensive integrative approach to address the root causes and thereby prevent a multitude of developmental health concerns. If you're like me, this isn't something you ever learned or were exposed to in your educational process. But the more I learn about it, the more it astonishes me what is possible when we realize that we can do so much more for our patients than just fill or straighten teeth, as the case may be. So without further ado, let's get on to today's episode, our 100th episode with the Doctors Dean-Duru. Enjoy the show, everybody. Welcome to the Doc Podcast, Lynda and Krystle.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for coming on. As I told you right before we hopped on recording, you are the 100th episode. So this is really, really cool for me as well to have you on for this, because it's a really neat episode to have a mother-daughter and practicing together. Two people on one episode is really fun for me. And I'm really looking forward to what we're going to get to discuss today. So before we jump into the X's and O's and details of what you all are doing and the amazing things you're doing in your practice, when we first met back in the fall of 2024 at the AHS meeting in Fort Lauderdale, I was really blown away by what you two are doing. I didn't know much about it, to be honest. And as I started listening to the approach that you both are taking to patient care, it just started to open my mind to so many things. As we know, though, you don't start there. It's a journey, and it takes time for all of us to get to the point we get to, especially when we're outside the box thinkers and people who are pushing that envelope and not just doing what we were taught in school and putting our heads down, going to work every day and straightening teeth or filling teeth, so to speak. So we'll start with Lynda first. How did you get to where you are? Because you and I were walking back from the restaurant that one night, and you started telling me more about your story. And it's just so fascinating. So kind of take it back, if you'd like to, even from how you got into this field and your journey of health and wellness and how it's led you to where you are today. And then we'll go to Krystle to talk about her journey.
Oh, thank you so much. I always want to go back to where it all started for me. I was an 8-year-old at the time, and I'm the first of nine, eight surviving. And one of my younger brothers had a toothache. And at the time, we didn't know that's what it was. Where I come from, toothache was not a thing. Well,
Mm.
we got malaria every week. So that was what we were all dealing with. And so he was in pain and he wouldn't let anybody else carry him. So that meant he wasn't sleeping through the night and I wasn't sleeping through the night. And eventually, when we got to the dental office, the doctor, who I thought it was a miracle, because once she took the tooth out, my brother was like a different kid.
Mm.
And at that time, if you're halfway decent at school, you wanted to be a doctor. So as soon as that happened, I said, "What do you do to be this kind of doctor?" And she said, "Oh, it's difficult." As I said, "I don't care. That's the kind of doctor I want to be." And so, as it turned out, I did go to dental school, and I'm just finding out that what he had was actually totally preventable. It was a dental abscess. And so it formed the basis of my practice, always wanting to prevent. I never wanted another kid to go through what my brother went through. So that informed how I practice. And I did dental school at home, Nigeria, which is where I'm originally from. And at school, you had to learn to be a doctor, like your whole body doctor, because you couldn't tell the neighbor, like, "Oh, I can't treat malaria," and then they'll run you out of town. So you had to treat the whole body as one. And that never left me, coming through and coming over here to practice. That's how I always viewed it. And I've always had beautiful faces and smiles and that for the kids because I learned to start early enough to help them grow better. However, I did not at the time understand breathing and sleep and how what it had to do with faces and stuff
Mhm.
until I got in my mid 40s. I couldn't recover from what we thought was bronchitis. And doctor to doctor until the fifth doctor took a look into my mouth and said, "You must have sleep apnea." Oh, you can imagine my things at that point because I'm going like, if there's something in the mouth that tells you you have sleep apnea, I should know it. I'm
Right, right.
okay. But she was right. She sent me for a sleep test, and I had moderate sleep apnea.
Hmm.
And then I got a CPAP, the machine that goes over your face to go to sleep with pumping oxygen and the symptoms of the fatigue, the brain fog. Oh, I became like a different person.
Hmm.
I'm feeling myself again. So 7 years later, it stopped working. And when it stopped working, my options were to have my jaws broken so they could make more room for my tongue. And I'm going, "No, thank you. I'm not doing
Hmm.
that." And so looking for options for myself is when I started hearing more about how your face grows, determines how well you breathe, how myofunctional therapy, tongue tie reliefs, and all of those things. And then going back to pictures of me at 9 months of age, all the signs were there.
Hmm.
The signs of sleep disordered breathing, it was a tense fist and clenched fist and twisted neck. And I was just an irritable baby, my mom said. And I then at that point started thinking, "Oh, I've been seeing babies. We see babies as early as 2 days old. We have the option and we have the privilege of being able to redirect their growth." And so that's how you get to learn a lot more, be able to put things together and help parents connect the dots. So essentially, we help parents connect the dots now so that they can help their children not have to go through that path.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so cool to see. That's why I love hearing the background to where people got to where they are today, because in each of those situations, something, call it God, spirit, whatever it was, something was guiding you to be who you are today. And you think because of your brother's suffering and then because of your suffering, you are helping so many young children who won't see that suffering as a result of that. And I always like to try to emphasize that because when we get caught up in everything, the world is so fast paced and everything is going so quickly. And we're kind of always hyper focused on the next thing. And
Yeah.
we often don't stop and reflect why did we get to this point personally and societally, really? Not to get too philosophical about it, but it just is a great example of, if you learn from your surroundings and you see what's around you and you are constantly a critical thinker and critical learner, it opens up a whole new reality. And conversely, if you stick your head in the sand and pretend like you have no control over anything and everything's just what it is and going to be, it definitely chart a different course. So
Absolutely.
thank you for that. So Krystle, and I'd love to hear yours.
Well, I mean, I'd always wanted to be in healthcare since I was 8 years old. I wanted to be in healthcare and work with kids like me at the time.
Yep.
I said I really, really enjoyed seeing the impact that my mom had on children and seeing her evolution and seeing, firsthand how she treated patients. That's where I said, okay, I'm not only just going to learn conventional pediatric dentistry, which is what I learned. I wanted to know how all of it connected, understanding that how well your face grows determines how well you breathe. I found out as I started to do more education and more advanced education through her guidance, of course, and through the courses that we took, that breathing impacts everything from your sleep, speech, emotions, and it connects to how your face grows and how your jaws grow. So that's our realm of impact. And so I just stepped into it, not just because of our family legacy, but also wanting to offer children a different trajectory on how they're growing and how they're going to be, and help them be what we like to say their best self, what God is really, or the higher power has really ordained them to be, so that was, and it started from the womb forward. And just like you mentioned, the world is fast paced, but realizing that with children, you have to slow it down before it gets fast in order to build that foundation. And that's what me especially had to learn, because I was really into like, okay, we can get things done. I can really work fast. I learned how to do that. I worked in places where I learned how to work fast. But I realized with kids and their development and kind of building that foundation, you really have to step back before they can exponentially grow in the direction that you want them to. So that was some of the inspiration and motivation for me to go into this field with my mom.
I love that. I love the family side of it. I love the fact that you were seeing what your mother was doing and understanding it was helping change lives and helping people. And I really do believe, even when I'm critical of some of my colleagues on their approach to this, I think you both could vouch for me with some of the comments I made at the meeting we were at. I always try to grant the grace of, we all want to help our patients. I really, right? Like, I don't look at this, even people who will talk more about some of the blowback you both face. But I don't feel like the people who disagree with an approach you might take or I might take are thinking of this, I don't want to help my patients. Right. Like they're helping people. I don't want to do that. I really don't. I think it's just insecurity. It's lack of understanding. And what I give you both tremendous credit for is that you pushed through those emotional, psychological barriers. That isn't easy. It is much easier. And I love how you said that you need to slow it down with kids. That is one of the things I teach, is how to actually had an article in OrthoTown. Part 1 came out recently on OSA and sleep disordered breathing. And then part 2 is coming out in, I think, summertime, about it's actually the diagnostic process that we need to go through with kids. And you can teach me, and I'm looking forward to learning more through this episode on what you do even younger than I ever did it. But even on sort of your, early mixed dentition patients, late primary, early mixed dentition patients, which is where I teach a lot of what to recognize in these kiddos. We're not taught this. We're taught get in there and treat.
Yeah.
Right. And we overlook the diagnostic process. Yeah. We don't slow down. And that's why I love how you phrase that, because we need to take a breath, no pun intended, slow down and be more present for our patients in the diagnostic process. We're so quick to want to look quickly at the radiographs or clinical images or whatever they are, do a quick look in the mouth, right? Quick exam, and then get to solving problems. And we don't take enough time. And I really feel this is our training. I just think we're wired this way. This is what we're taught to do, right? We're taught through all our years of schooling to fix things. We're taught to see the missing tile on the wall and go try to fix it. Yeah. We're not taught to think, well, why is the tile missing? Like what happened, right? Is it a structural problem? Is it something that just, it wasn't built properly? Is the earth underneath it shifting? What is causing this? We just want to fix. And I've been very guilty of that myself, especially early in my career. So as you started down that path and started down that path to practice differently, what did it look like? Or I guess maybe a better question would be, is even taking to what you do today, you don't have to get too granular or deep now. We'll get into that in a little bit. But just if you could give the audience an overview of what does a day look like for the two of you?
Well, for the most part, obviously, after the morning huddle, you get to go what's on the schedule, what's on there, and things like that. For most of the patients who come in, they come after they've had like a discovery call, like their first contact with our practice, a discovery call, where we figure out what's going on with them. There's a team member that does that call and be able to explain to them that you're not going to a typical practice. When you come here, we're going to ask them a lot of questions. Actually, it's from their intake form. It's like a lot of questions. They go about, what was this pregnancy like? What was the birth like? And sometimes they don't always answer all of it because they're going, what's that got to do with teeth?
Right.
Everything else. So when they do come in, we go over that again and we go like, okay, we're looking at your child as a whole person. Doesn't mean we're treating a whole person, but at least we know enough to be able to say, here's the direction you go with this and that. So we're helping them when we hear their stories, we're helping them connect the dots. And a lot of times it's the first time that they've been able to get questions on their minds answered. Most moms always know that something is not right. Yes. And anytime they've been told that, oh, there's nothing wrong, they're going to grow out of it, or they don't even understand that that child not wanting to eat certain kinds of foods had to do with how well their jaws and how well their tongues are moving. And so it's not uncommon to get parents who are crying in our practice every day that joyous cry in a sense that now they can see a reason why their child is doing what they're doing,
or what they went through,
or what they went through themselves, and go, oh, this is how it started. And so they, we'll help them connect the dots and at least get, okay, that part is done. And then we get into what do you do after you connect the dots?
Yeah, so there's a lot of interviewing, deep questions, on a daily basis, right? So it's very different, right? We're used to, we do have a general pediatric as well. So we are seeing patients that we're taking care of, the symptoms and things like that. But the majority of our work has to do with interviewing patients, them interviewing us, having really intense conversations, showing them, because, images are taken, things like that, just kind of showing them initially what's going on and the lay of the land before we say, okay, this is what we need to do to then get started. So it is not an immediate, like we're getting started. It really is like a unlearning, relearning, realization, come to Jesus moments, all types of things before, and even just realizing, like she said, my pediatrician didn't tell me this, my other dentist didn't tell me, sometimes we're the third, fourth opinion, and that they found through other means and not through anybody. Slowly but surely, other providers are like, let's go there. Go there.
Yep.
But so they're having that deep conversation and data gathering, initial data gathering, because there's more. And going through that initial intake that they didn't fill out and just like making them answer the questions, making them remember. That's the biggest overall. If there's anyone to say, okay, what are you doing daily? A lot of discussing, talking, going through images and figuring out how to get you from the level that you were, a lack of understanding, to even just a little bit, or tying in the Google University courses that you were taking and getting you to see, that great job for doing some research. Parents are part of the treatment too, letting them part of it, but also here I am with the knowledge that I have to actually help you. You don't have to rely on that, because that's what stresses them out. They're doing research, and a lot of providers are like, oh my God, but I give it to the parents and saying, I'm thankful that she did this. However, I did the work of understanding how to synthesize this information. So let me help you, right? And go from there. Because this is it's a big, big thing. If a parent is not on board,
Yes.
nothing is going to go right. And
Yeah.
that's how we determine who is going to be a part of the program or not. Before we were dragging people, now it's like, we're in this together. You need to see the value. So I'm going to help you, help yourself.
That's such a great point about not forcing patients to buy into something that all we can do is show them.
Yeah.
Lead the horse to water, right? Like you can lead them to the information. And when I teach residents, I say this all the time. It is not our job to tell the patient that they have to do this, we are forcing them to do this. Our job is to detect the problems, be great diagnosticians, and then be great communicators to present the possible solutions.
Absolutely.
And then from there, we might not be comfortable with a certain solution, and they might want it. We might have to say, I'm not the person for that solution. if this is a case that would require ABC, and I'm not saying that no one else would do it a different way, but I feel this is what's required. And we have to, as clinicians, and it's really hard for young docs. It was really hard for me and it took me years. So I'm not saying that I was great at this. Even later in my clinical career, I still struggled with it. Being able to say, like, we're not a fit. And it doesn't mean it's not a reflection on you or on me. It's just it's just us together is not a thing. Does that happen often? Because what you're talking about to them is not only outside of the norm of what's being communicated to them by other providers. It's also, as you said, it's very emotional. It's very distressing. It can be overwhelming. So how do you find your patient families tend to handle these conversations?
Well, different people handle them differently. Some people will come to us because they've already heard that we do this. But most people, it gets a little bit more nuanced because they're able to go they can piece it together quicker. The ones that have a little more difficulty are the ones who came in thinking, there's nothing wrong with my kid. I just want their teeth checked. So we do have a conversation, and sometimes they allow us to get into the assessment part. And we go through the diagnostics and go like a whole presentation for them, what's going on and what needs to happen and stuff like that. And so in the beginning, we were able to say, okay, well, maybe you can do this part and not this part. Maybe you can do that part and not that part. And we found that we were getting mixed results from that. So now we're going, this is a process that has given our patients the best outcome. And we don't work with parents who are not a 10. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like, oh, I don't know about this, 10 being like, I would have done this 20 years ago if I knew about it. Because those are the ones that you get the best results with. They're asking for a lifestyle change. It's not something like easy as pop a pill and then just get done. But we're trying to get to root causes and helping remove those obstacles, because believe it or not, He made us, the Almighty made each of us with everything we need inside of us. And we do that securely, wholeheartedly. And so if that child is now showing up their best selves, something is causing that obstacle. So let's look and find how many of those obstacles can we remove for them so that their best selves show up. And as such, being a parent, you don't know what you don't know, but they tend to see that as we go along. We spend a lot of time educating them. That first appointment that we talked about is an hour and a half, even when it's a 1-year-old. We spend a lot of time with that parent trying to help them see what we're seeing and see the consequences of what could be going on with their kid.
And you mentioned what can hold back certain providers, and I totally understood you. And you said it. We said it. When a parent says no, or you have to say you're not a fit, and you're just like, oh my God, that's profit leaving, right? And so part of what we had to do was kind of say, okay, go ahead first, full on in, right? Not allowing the patient to run something that you know better than them, and not in a it's more of a protective way, right? they know their child, but you know how to get their child where they want the child to be. And having that understanding took us a while because, like I said, once we learned everything, we were like, well, we already spent money on this investment or invested on our education. Like, let's get it, but then you have to realize you have to get your team on board. You have to get the workflow on board. You have to get yourself to slow down and say, no, I'm going to take this time and make sure that mom knows what's going on and let her know everybody who's going to be involved in this treatment has to be around for the full treatment plan consult and go through like a PowerPoint presentation. So as a provider, you're doing a lot of work as if you were back in school, gathering all that data, putting it in a PowerPoint, and then going through it with the parent. Those things take some time. And so, but if you skip those initial foundational steps for parents, for the understanding, you're going to get an uninformed patient. And an uninformed patient in a program that requires them to do something at home is going to cause a lot of miscommunication. And so that took that was trial and error, because again, behind the scenes, we know what we're doing. We know we're going to fix you, we're going to do. But a parent is like, I want to choose this instead of I want to choose that. And you have to be like, well, you can't.
You need those boundaries. Yeah.
Initially, that was even more difficult for me personally because of my own story. And so I was seeing myself in every of those children.
Right.
So it seemed like for the parents, it's like, why does she want this more than me?
Right.
Could not help it. And as a matter of fact, one of my patients' moms, when one time she kept coming there, she eventually did a sleep study, and the kid had mild sleep apnea, like 4.5 AHI. And so they told her it's mild, it's okay. But every time that kid came, he looked like he's dead in the morning. And so I eventually said, listen, I cannot keep seeing this child like this. You're going to either have to treat them or you're going to leave the practice, right? So it's like, okay. And for me, she did start treatment. And soon after she said, oh, he's waking up making breakfast for everyone. Like he's totally transformed. But that's hard. It's hard when you've had the experience and you can see the child and you know that child, we see ourselves as advocates for them. They can't speak for themselves. They don't know. Half the time you say you have headaches in the morning, they go, yes, I do. And the mom say, no, you don't. They go, no, mom, I actually do.
Yes.
So no one ever asked them. So they didn't know it was not right. So knowing all of those as a provider, then your tendency, at least was true for me, like, I want to help. But sometimes it gets misinterpreted. Like, oh, you just want to make money. You just want to do that. But yes, of course, I do want to recoup my investment. But if I had to talk about what the investment is, no, I have not recouped it at all. So, but the joy of seeing a child come and their faces are bright, like you see them showing up as who they're meant to be.
Yes.
Put a price on that. All right. So
thank you for saying that. I say that you can't put a price on what it does to your soul when you see one of these kiddos start to change. And we just had one happen recently in the residency, and the parents' reaction and the tears and the time it takes to synthesize that information is why I feel, and you both highlighted it beautifully, I feel that is part of where we lose a lot of our colleagues. Would you agree with that? Because ultimately, right, it doesn't fit the formula.
You lost me.
And that's the truth, actually. He's like, what? Now what? And now you got to do what again?
And then you got to talk to them. And then you got to, it's just so much. Why can't we just do? That's me. I was on, we like to say there's a roller coaster and you're in the front seat and you're like, yes. And then third seat, you're just like, okay, I don't feel anything. I don't understand this. I was on the third seat. And so when we started seeing patients just get better, even I love doing the releases, even just doing simple releases. And they're, next day, they're like, parents are like, he's eating everything. He's like, his face looks better. When I got it done for myself, I'm also a patient, right? So being a patient, that exponentially bolstered my involvement and enthusiasm for understanding why, okay, we have to do it this way. It makes sense. It really does make a lot of sense. And so to me, it gets faster. The more you do, the faster it becomes. For us providers who are like, oh my God, this is so much work, I don't have time. You find the time, especially if this is the way you want to go. You can't just half step it.
Yeah. And it's so hard to just incorporate this into a busy, thriving practice that is going 100 miles an hour and then say, oh, I'm going to do a little more,
right?
Maybe on my intake process. And yes, you need to start somewhere. But if you don't have your team behind you, if you don't have the right education, if you don't understand what you're doing, and you just try to make it about delivering the treatment.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right. I mean, you're basically setting yourself up for failure. And that's, I think, where a lot of people too, that I teach and coach on the orthodontic side, feel like, well, this doesn't work, or it's not going to work. And I've often called out the studies that were done on phase 1 treatment. Well, if you look at what they did and how they did it, of course it's not going to work.
All the pieces weren't there. Yeah.
Right. It's like, I mean, if anything in life, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't execute it properly, it's not going to have a great outcome. So it's so hard to take an approach that is part of both, I feel. I don't know it from the pediatric dental side like you do. I can speak to the orthodontic side more accurately. Do you feel like on the pediatric side, I know you said you do some restorative and traditional pediatric dentistry as well. Do you think it's possible for people to dabble in what you are doing, looking at more of the holistic approach, starting these kids young, going through the intensive intake process that you are? Or do you think that it's something where you really have to make this part of your mission and vision as a practice and go all in on it?
Initially, again, we've tried it all. I think we are probably patient zero when it comes to how to incorporate it in the practice, because and do piecemeal. We started off with Healthy Start. We started off with just using MyoBrace and things like that. And then once we understood that it's not just Habit appliance, is not just one appliance. You have to have many tools in your toolbox. And on top of that, you have to have therapies around those tools in your toolbox to really make it grow. And then on top of that, you need to make sure you're collaborating with other providers and understand what they do. It is not something that you can dibble and dabble. I'm just going to say it. If you want to do it right, you cannot dibble and dabble. You either have to, on a business side, get an associate and start planning to do this.
Interesting. Nice point. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Right.
Right. You just have to slow it. You either have to kind of have a come to Jesus moment with yourself in a business sense and say, I'm going to get an associate, or I'm going to do this. And then in the background, I'm going to do the courses. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to treat anybody. I'm just going to be doing these courses, getting an understanding, getting a good consultant if possible, that can help you reorganize things, and then hunker down and know that there's going to be a slowdown in your income, right? In that sense.
Thinks that, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people I hear think that, oh, you're doing this just chasing the dollars.
Well,
everybody with whom I've spoken on the orthodontic and on the pediatric dental or general dental side, if you go all in and you are business savvy and you're good, yes, you will find a way to generate revenue. We are running businesses, and we deserve, name the orthodontist or pediatric dentist or general dentist who's trying to not make a profit, right? Like, because they're doing it on traditional restorative or Invisalign or braces or whatever, versus the way you're doing it. We're all running a business, but at the core of that, we're trying to provide a service. And whenever you drastically change your business model, which is what you did, and I went through it, initially, you take a hit, right?
Yeah, it's very, what you guys are saying is very relevant, because I was doing early interceptive orthodontics and even some full orthodontics from 1998 or so as their early treatment and stuff. And of course, I'd get, like I said, we get beautiful smiles, beautiful faces. I did not understand the connection with the rest of the body and how much it affected it. And so when I started learning these things, for 2 years, I did not treat. Because I'm like, what are you telling me? The things I was doing before, what was I doing? I wasn't helping the kids really, because they had sleep issues, the TMD, the anxiety, all of those things. So I felt like I did not do a good service to those kids. And for me, a lot of them are in the practice. So I was seeing my work firsthand. And so it was difficult to keep treating in that old model. So you don't start cases for 2 years. Come on, you know what that's going to do into your bottom line.
Right.
But I was willing to go through that process because I believe in my heart that if we could get one kid not to develop sleep apnea in our practice, we would feel successful. So you have to have that mission and conviction and be able to know that for a long time, it's going to be a labor of love. Maybe a little quicker now because in 2017, parents didn't hear about this.
Yeah.
Now that it's on TikTok and Instagram, maybe it'll be a little bit easier.
We have orthodontic friends.
And you have orthodontic
Yep.
who are talking about it.
Who aren't putting daggers behind our backs.
Yep. Absolutely. And that is such a good point because it takes all of us together. And I've always tried to stay open-minded on every approach. And I always say, I didn't learn how to do this in my training. And I went through a lot of trial and error and I made a lot of mistakes. And I had the advantage that I ran my own practice. I was my own boss. So if I did want to make these changes, I talked to a lot of docs who will say to me, Mike, I get it. I believe in a lot of what you're doing and this makes total sense. I'm in a practice. I can't do that. So I've worked on some of my shows. I've talked to people about strategizing ways to start to incorporate this to help those people along. One thing you also just said there, Lynda, when you were speaking was you don't want to see them develop sleep apnea. And I love it because that was the overall point of that article I wrote. We need to start thinking, and Audrey Yoon had a great article in Journal of Prosthodontics in late 2024, which talked about that our goal really needs to be, and even going back further, Dr. Krystle Dean-Duru, he talked a lot about this. Our goal needs to be to stop the progression of disease. So detect the signs and symptoms early, right? Recognize and understand what those comorbidities are and how severe they are. And we're going to start to talk about those now. And then stop that chain of disease progression. Sleep disordered breathing is a spectrum of disease. It is not, you can't take a test for it. You can't get, PSG is not going to tell you about just their, right? Like you said, there's this guy, he comes back mild sleep apnea on his PSG, but you see the kid suffocating and suffering and he's got all the signs. So we love things that have a test. We love a label, and I'm not being that critical about that. We just do. Like we're kind of geeky that way. We're in the numbers world in dentistry, right? We love the numbers side. So it's like, oh, I've got a number, I've got a score, I can deal with that.
Right.
The abstract nature of recognizing the clinical signs and symptoms of this with the goal that you're preventing something from being developed that you can't prove in that particular human will be developed. You can't prove the future. You don't know, but you can use deductive reasoning and look at the comorbidities and the signs and symptoms and understand that patients who initially present that way have a much higher probability of going down that path. So what are some of the things that you all do when you see these young kiddos? What are you looking for? And what are some of the early action steps you are taking after you've gone through that thorough diagnostic process to start to help these kids out?
I think maybe it will go back a little bit further and go start from the third trimester for mom. Actually, all the prenatal is important.
If you want to start on talking about that, that'd be great. Please.
Prenatal is important because the environment where that baby is going to grow will also determine who they become or the shape of their faces as well. But let me bring it now closer to for us as dentists and how it will become important for us. I don't know that. We studied this in embryology, but just never really paid attention to it. But that the tongue is a second muscle group that is formed after the heart. And so that by 4 weeks in utero is already peristaltic. It's already moving even before the brain differentiates and is attached all the way to the toes. And there's good reason for that because it's like the rudder in the mouth that helps to distribute the messaging and information on that. And picture when the kids are now, when they're born, when they come out, they have to have a good suck, swallow, breathe reflex, which sets the foundation for the neurological integration for the babies. Go a little bit further, by the time they're 6 months of age, when the first teeth come in, and you should be able to have what's called anterior coupling. And the anterior coupling helps so that you can also have the neural integration. It helps to now be this beginning of a mature swallow. So you go from the infantile swallow that's not trusting, and to now this anterior teeth form, the incisors form the boundary. So the tongue now goes inside, and that's being able to move a little bit differently. That's also protective for the muscle groups as well. And that's the things that also helps with grinding and clenching if you get good integration from that. So all of those are all together, right? And so when the baby comes out and they can't feed or just have a suck, swallow, breathe reflex properly, but they have difficulty in latching, that's the beginning of a problem there. And that's when we have to think back to, and that's one of the reasons we ask the birth story. What did this child go through as they were coming into this world? And birth is our first traumatic experience, no matter how it happens. However, in things that we have to use to help the baby come out safely will now make it more difficult, or will also affect how they function. And so the osteopathic colleagues call it somatic dysfunction. And the most important part of that is what happens to the back of the cranium from the compressive forces. So things like pitocin, or even when they have a C-section, or use a forceps to help with delivery, or vacuum to help with delivery, all of those affect the fascia. And so with that compression, all the nerves can also get compromised on their function. And the two very important ones for us are the hypoglossal nerve, which goes to the tongue, and the vagus nerve, which is your rest and digest. And so if they come out with any of those, or if those nerves are not functioning at its best, you may have trouble latching. It's not necessarily because there's a tongue tie that needs to be cut. And so one has to sort of kind of walk back and go, how can I get this body that has just been through trauma, how can I get it back to where the fascia is easy and free flowing, and then be able to determine the function that baby is supposed to have, which is I'm breathing, sucking, swallowing, breathing at the same time. And I don't know how much further I can keep going. Just keep going.
No, I'm loving this. I'm learning because again, we don't learn this. This is beyond I mean, I heard you speak on some of this when I heard you speak in the fall. It's just, it does take a couple times to hear it, to be honest, to start to process and digest it all, because this isn't what we are learning in school. So yeah, no, please keep going.
Absolutely. So anyway, so some of the other things that there's difficulty nursing, or the kid that's spitting up all the time, or they're colicky, they're irritable, or even their neck is twisted, and that's called torticollis. So all of those become important to restore that function. And sometimes their mouth is now open, they're not breathing properly. They're not sleeping properly. That's a cycle, right? And so if in the beginning, all of those times that you're supposed to be born obligate nose breathers, and you start from birth with open mouth breathing, when's that going to stop?
Right. Yeah. And that is why the article that, I don't know if you guys saw, the article came out, and I don't know if it went to print, the one in AJO, he was asked, a colleague of mine was asked to print, well, he said in the article, he was asked to put this together. So I'm assuming by the editor of the AJO, but he doesn't say by whom, he just says he was asked to write this. And he just basically went on about the fact that this whole nasal breathing thing is hyped and oh yeah. For those of you listening on audio and not on the video, both of their eyes like literally almost popped out of their skulls when I said that. So because those of us who know that is insane and illogical, we hear that and we just think, I feel sorry for people that think that, because he's clearly never changed the life of a child like you all do every day, and like I've been blessed to have done many, many times and do through the residents now. It's somewhat sad. And he's making this argument for a few pages of text. It's his opinion piece, but he makes this argument on why, even going to the Harvard studies, that because monkeys are obligate nasal breathers by making them mouth breathers, that because humans are, he doesn't say this, but he just says we're not obligate nasal breathers. At childhood and infant, we are. As we grow up, obviously we can open our mouths more and breathe. And he's making the case because of the length of, I think something to do with the soft palate, the monkeys are not, so that it has a more profound effect on them when they open their mouths to breathe. I mean, these are the lengths that these people are going to try to say that nasal breathing is not that big of a deal. And yes, while severe mouth breathing could be problematic, we don't really know what severe is versus mild. And really, it's much ado about nothing, instead of the fact that it's to me, it's the canary in the coal mine, right? So talk a little bit about the mouth breathing side. When you're seeing this, what do you tend to see in these patients who are open mouth breathing from a very young age? And why is that concerning to you?
It's a great question, because if they're open mouth breathing, that means their tongue is low. Their tongue is laying low, and so many things besides the tongue being up, with each swallow helping to develop the palate, helping to develop the nasal passages, and also helping to develop your oropharyngeal airway. That tongue being up is also stimulating the SBS, the spinobasilar symphysis, which right above it is the celotosica, which houses a pituitary gland, which now with that tongue motion, you are able to just kind of get all the hormones that comes from the pituitary gland. And mind you, the hypothalamus is, I think, anterior to that. And so without getting good mid-face development, a lot of the precursors to a lot of the hormonal system, you don't develop well on. And so your whole body, your whole physiology is different. And so your the face grows longer, and they just use you
or oxygenation throughout your body. Right? If you're an open mouth breather, the whole point of having a nasal filtration system is to be able to filter, humidify the air, make the air good enough, this dirty air, that our body is not working so hard, our lungs aren't working so hard to be able to get this air. So
the nitric oxide in the nasal sinuses. Yep.
Exactly. So that's killing the pathogens, enhancing optimizing oxygenation, just regulating the blood pressure and regulating sleep as well. So if one is to say mouth breathing is not such a big deal and you're doing it constantly, but the nose does all this great things for you, it's just such a, I don't know. It's a disconnect. It's definitely pure disconnect to say it's not a big deal. And that Harvard study was like, that's huge. That was a study to show that mouth breathing is a big. It actually, maybe it happens quicker with them because there's other the changes, but we're not going to do it on an adult. Actually, that's how James Nestor did it. He did it on himself, right? Yep. And he showed, actually, did the guy read the book? Like,
I think he might have referenced in there, don't quote me on that, something about it. I think he might have said something to the effect of that contributing to I could be conflating that with something else, but that it was contributing to kind of the hype about it. If I'm thinking of that correctly,
it's a good hype to have.
Yeah.
We need to hype it up even more, because the way we're mouth breathing, which we're only supposed to do for survival, we talked about our bodies being a machinery, right? And so, yes, the mouth is a fail-safe when the nose can't breathe, but it's not supposed to be our source of breathing at all.
Right. And there are studies in humans, which I'm actually going to be doing an episode shortly with a couple of people where we're going to talk about some of that article in a little more detail and refute a lot of the comments that were made. But there are numerous studies that were done with this on humans. Breslin had a study in '83 in the AJO, which that was before it was the AJODO. Hune had a study, it was 2010 in AJODO, and they all found the exact same things Harvold found, but this was looking at it with human patients, not in the rhesus monkeys like Harvold. Study in International Journal of Clinical Pediatric Dentistry in 2024. They had ENTs looking at the airway, because that's one of the things he said is, well, how do you quantify mouth breathing? Is it real severe? Well, maybe the mouth is not as open or more open. How do you quantify that? So they were looking at, did orthodontists look at the cephs of patients, the cephalometric radiographs, ENTs quantify whether they were actually a mouth breathing or nasal breathing patient, and then they looked at the overall growth of these patients, and they found the same thing, that it's causing dental skeletal changes and steepness of the mandibular plane angle and constriction of the transverse growth and increased dental crowding. In that paper, the end result was that they said that they recommended early detection and treatment to develop the adequate physiologic growth and aesthetics. So, when people, just because you haven't read the articles or seen the data, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it's amazing, though, to me, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I would love to hear your thoughts on, because it's maybe I'm the only one curious about this, but I think it's really interesting. Why do you think people are so opposed to this? Like, what about that would make somebody take that? Because it's a thoroughly written article that has multiple references. I mean, it took him time. It's not like it just, he sat down one day and took an hour and sort of threw this down on a piece of paper. Why would someone spend that much time and energy trying to stop us from helping restore a physiologically normal process to our patients?
I always go back to when we go to school, sometimes it becomes our whole who we are, our whole personality. How well we do becomes how well we are functioning as a person. How we get external validation from others becomes our whole being. And so for some people, they don't get out of that. If he went to certain lengths to prove something that is not even intuitively strong, let's say, the story that it's telling me is that his whole validation comes from outside, and this is threatening. What we're saying, what we're talking about is threatening who he is and who he's always been and what he's known. And if he really sat back and looked at all the things we're talking about, because everything we're talking about is high level, but it's deep. It's high, but deep, because we're logical, we're talking to physiology, but we're also just close your mouth, breathe through your nose. Like, it sounds very simple and high level, but maybe as he grew up, this is, again, I don't know who this person is. This picture,
I don't know him personally either. I don't.
This picture,
we can probably tell you, right? And so there's certain things maybe he doesn't want to remember. He gathers who he is through outside sources. And we all study, we all did a lot of work. We were all trained. It's almost traumatic, right? We all went to camp in school and had to learn, and that's okay. That helps us develop discipline. But the knowledge that we learn is not all we're supposed to remain. That's not all we're supposed to kind of hold on to, right? From what I've learned, even by my short time and experience in learning life, what I learned in school is only basic.
Foundation. That's it, right?
Foundational. And it's not an insult to anybody. It's just, that's the knowledge that I needed to know to be able to just help a patient. Now I can help them even more with this elevated knowledge that I've attained over a long period of time. This is a 7-year journey for me, a 100-year journey for my mom. Like, it's, it feels like it, right? It feels like. So that's what I start. I no longer have this kind of abject. Well, I mean, yes, our eyes will raise each time we hear certain things that just doesn't make sense anymore. But I'm also I have privilege of knowledge. If he sits in a course that I've been in that changed my mind and changed my whole, he might have a breakdown, but he gets something out of it, right? And that's what we're seeing for a lot of this. You're always going to have those people, and they teach us to learn even more.
Yes.
To also help answer certain questions, because if he's got that question, or if he's taken this time to really drill down on something that, again, it's very intuitive, then that means we haven't done our job. We have to do more to continue.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I've asked multiple people who have that point of view to come on the show and have a debate with me or discussion on this. I've openly, and I said, it's not a matter of me, right, you wrong. It's just, I want to expose some of what I feel are some misgivings and misinformation that you are spreading. And you can call me out on things you disagree with me. Let's have a discussion on this. They don't take me up on it. They don't take me up on it.
They're not going to, because they're still looking to find what it is going to be true for them.
Yes.
This past weekend, we just finished a full day training for the ECHO group with Dr. Hang's group.
Oh, cool.
And so part of what we did was do, I think, what do you guys call it here? It's oobleck. Cornstarch and water. Trying to teach about biotensegrity and thixotrophy. So when I had that mix with them, I was, okay, push hard. So when you push hard, it just doesn't bulge. And when you slowly just touch it gently, then it sort of kind of flows. And that's what you're looking for the body.
That's what the body,
that's what the body does. That's what the body wants. So you're not going to forcefully push things on it. So maybe if he did something like that, I'm kind of picking his brain like, oh, okay, maybe there's something to this. Like, you got to go.
And the point was to teach about osteopathy and what it does. And also when we're doing treatment in the body, right? Being able to make sure that we're doing what the body wants, because forceful motion, just like, initial rapid palatal expansion, it's going to cause some rebound.
Yep.
Body's like, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I needed. I moved for you, but now I'm going to go back to the way I was before. And so being able to, and we were teaching this course, it was like our first full day course, and we were helping to kind of get everyone to see how early life functions that don't seem that important, like breathing, right?
Yep.
The lips closed, having the tongue up, and understanding why all that is important when you're going to now put an appliance in a patient, right? So yeah, that experiment was like something visceral that they can feel, because that we did oobleck in elementary school, right? We all learn the cornstarch thing, but understand thixotrophy at that time, biotensegrity, like
right.
So now being able to even just have that and say you push too hard on something, that includes that happens in life. You push too hard on people.
Sure. Forces of nature. Yeah. I mean,
right.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, it is it's something I have to be careful of when I'm speaking. My tendency is always to push a little too hard. I've got to remember those forces sometimes.
Your family, your friends, they're the worst ones. You start saying stuff and you're like, you got a mouth tape. They're like, oh my God, what are you talking about? I'm not going to strap myself in. I'm like, oh.
Right. Well, maybe I should have eased into that one a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. Hey, on the note of where we're talking about with all these little things that are adding up, Roger Price was on my show a few weeks back, and we got talking about epigenetics, and he started talking about things taking place during gestation. And when he said it, I actually went back and wrote the quote down when I was producing the episode, because I wanted to read it to the two of you to get your take on this. And what he said is the baby takes 60 to 70,000 breaths per day for the first 6 months of life. If they are struggling with every breath, they start to develop compensations. This can result in the primitive reflexes not integrating in time. The moment you have tethers, C-sections, inability to breastfeed or swallow, or nose breathe, the tongue drops. I actually should be saying this in his accent. I couldn't do it justice. I love his voice is awesome. The tongue drops and can no longer assist in the growth of the maxilla. So you have both been talking about this, and I think it just drives home the point that so much is happening when we say they're nose breathing. When you stop and think that they're taking 60 to 70,000 breaths a day, and if they're doing that, I don't think anyone could make the argument that evolutionarily we're not designed to breathe through our noses, right? Krystle, you were just talking about all of the different properties that nasal breathing, of the benefits that it has. So if we're doing something incorrectly 60 to 70,000 times a day the first 6 months of our lives, why would we, because a lot of the things that I know face is people say, oh, just wait a while, let them continue, right? Why would we not go in earlier? And what do you do when you see these kiddos that are having these issues?
Well, I think that it's also important for us to remember that their brain is developing
Yes.
exponentially during that time. And part of them being able to develop well is that suck, swallow, breathe reflex, which means that you'll be breathing through your nose. That's the basis of staggering on the nervous system development, and for them to be able to transition gracefully through the autonomic nervous system, right? You go from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And so when they're not able to do that, most of them get stuck in sympathetic. And when you're stuck in the sympathetic drive, you cannot heal. Healing occurs during the parasympathetic phase of the nervous system. So when you see that early enough and you're able to help that parent go back to physiologically having them integrate those reflexes when they should integrate, which is usually by age 1 or 2, and at the latest 2. And so then the brain can get to the next higher function. If it doesn't integrate, you're not gonna, the brain is just, there's compensations everywhere. Then the brain is now struggling, which function should I get to? What should I do? And that.
Many tabs open in the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. So
what do we do? What do we do?
What do we do with those? Well, first,
if I could, before you even say that, what does that look like in the chair? What are you seeing to know that that's happening? And then, yes, what do you do about it? And just an example, I know it can be different for every patient, but just kind of generally speaking.
Obviously, the transition to being able to eat solid foods, they're now able to eat their solid foods. They're not breathing properly, or they're sleeping, their butts up in the air, tossing and turning during their sleep. And the open mouth posture, I think we've talked about that already.
They're having reflux.
Yeah, they have reflux. Yeah, they have reflux and things like that. So when we observe those and we want to figure out and say, okay, sometimes it's, many of us are looking for numbers, but there's some things that don't have numbers. And sometimes you'll have a number of something in one person and they have no symptoms at all.
Yes.
And another person, you have a low enough number and they have like severe symptoms. Like in my case, I was stopping breathing 25 times an hour, but my symptoms were severe. You would expect that looking at my craniofacial growth. But that's also because it's not a thing of numbers only. There's also the neuroreflexive part of the airway, which many people don't talk about a lot. So when we do observe those, we want to bring them back to physiologically stable position, right? And so we're going to be talking about getting whole foods in so they can start chewing more. That chewing reflex, which is the brain's ready for it by 4 months of age, but not necessarily you're going to start feeding them solids at that age. So at about 6 to 7 months, just feed them whole foods, let them chew. And so chewing will help the muscles develop. It will also help the joint, the TMJ, develop better, the ball and socket part, because that's also getting the tongue up more so that the ball and socket joint forms properly. The bottom jaw comes forward, and it also opens up the airway space as well. And then obviously we don't have nasal breathing, and that's when you tell the parents to watch the kid. If their mouth is habitually open, you gently push on their tongue to go up. In our practice, we give them the baby munchie, which is like a proprioceptive tool that they can use to get the PDL, the periodontal ligaments, and getting the alveolus to just start thinking, I need to push this together, and then have the lips hold together over it. So that sensation is getting the brain going, oh yes, my lips are supposed to be together, my lips be together. And then we have the parents check for other foods, like maybe there's some other things that could be causing inflammation in the body as well, and then check the environment. Mold is essentially very common than most people know. So we usually would tell them also to check the house for mold and dust and things like that, and stuff like that. So yeah.
Mhm.
And how does it, it's bad pun, so I shouldn't say this, but how does it tie into the tongue tie world? If I don't have a better word for it than that, because it does tie into that. So you mentioned before releases, tongue releases, and I think that again is one of those things. It's like expansion, right? Yes, in the right patient, timed properly with the right supportive treatment, it can make a huge difference. That doesn't mean that just going and releasing a patient is going to make all the stars align and make them this beautiful, perfect breather and grower. So, how do you determine who needs a release? What supportive therapies are part of that, and why does that help?
So with releases and tongue tie, tethered oral tissues, essentially restricted ones, those are obstacles, right? We know that to be obstacles, and that's something that we figure out what the obstacles are doing, what's going on, and to what degree do we need to help release that, right? And depending on the patient's age and abilities, especially if they're infants, right? Infants, with determining if it's affecting how they're feeding, it's affecting how their tongue is posturing. That includes their buccal and labial ties as well, the cheek and the upper and lower labial ties as well. And so oftentimes we're checking, because we said the tongue is connected all the way down to the toes through body fascia. So it's not just that the fascia is we need to figure out why the fascia is restricted, where it's restricted, where else in the body, before we're saying let's cut the tongue or let's cut other parts of the body. So just proper evaluation, functional evaluation, and then when using a laser light therapy, because that's what's helping a baby laser, or a laser light therapy kind of, I'll say, is like photobiomodulation, but not. There's heat involved in there. And typically with photobiomodulation, you're not using heat. And then also it's penetrating down to the nervous system. So there's neuromodulation occurring as well. So being able to release fascia, kind of like we have when we have tight muscles and things like that, that fascia is something all over our muscles that has nerves and blood vessels embedded in it. So if it's tight in one place, it's going to be tight in other places. Being able to determine what is actual tethering and what's actual just fascial restriction that needs to be, that the hyaluronic acid, that crystals need to be melted so that it's better muscle gliding, right? And better than functioning. So we take very, very special care in saying it's time for release or it's not time for release. So for infants, that might mean they have to see the osteopathic physician. For us, that's what we like. Oftentimes a neurologically trained chiropractor for the infant is also someone that we like, because there could be compression in different places that also is making fascia tight and restrictive. And it's not until we see a full body, just we see certain things to say, okay, we're ready, is when a baby gets released, right? And some people say, well, do you release toddlers? Not often. If it's about 18 months to 2-3 years old, that's where we need to then focus on the function, life functions, because you get that together, you get that, and unless if it's to the tip and we can see, you can tell restricted and nothing can be done, right? And that's really, it's not always, it's rare cases. Rare cases when that occurs. So in those rare cases, yes, you do, but parents have to know that you have to do the work after, right? Because this didn't just start in the vacuum. This started in utero. You can see a tongue tie 12 weeks in utero. So, and that's for the infants too. Even once we're done the tie releases, we then start baby ortho. Because we now have to start guiding the growth that they were subpar and dysfunctional in to start with, that tethering. So with toddlers, before doing any kind of anything, we're really focusing on their functions, their nasal breathing, and how everything is, their trajectory of growth before any releases. And then in our kind of that 5 and up, the same thing, checking their function. They oftentimes have to do some myofunctional therapy first and after, and then growth guidance before. So I say all this to say the tethering, the restricted oral tissue, is just a small piece. Just like you said initially, it's just a small piece of what is holding back proper growth. But having a good understanding that their nervous system, if that wasn't on board to start with, that you can't do, nothing's going to work. That tethering, that fascia which holds in trauma as well, is gonna find its way to tether again. When we talk about reattachment, things like that, well, oftentimes it could be just like you didn't see the actual restriction, and then there was also some mush of fascia in there in further tethering the tongue and restricting function. So laser therapy, we're using that a lot. A lot. It's amazing. That could be a whole nother show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
A whole nother show, but be that oral A's, baby lays, and just waking up the nervous system, relaxing, the sympathetic overdrive that they're in. And again, we're supposed to have the both. A lot of people are just like, oh, you want to get in parasympathetic? No, we're supposed to be able to transition elegantly through both states and know how to do that and regulate ourselves and be resilient enough to do it. So we're just trying to be able to get the internal regulation to go where it needs to go and do what it needs to do.
Yeah, and for infants too, it's really important to make sure that they have the mapping of their cranial nerves.
Yes.
Because again, obviously when they come out and they have trouble latching, the suck, swallow, breathe reflex is not optimal. I learned this from Dr. Lois Laney, and she's always saying about making sure that the brain has the resources that it needs to be able to now help you to get the function right. And so one of the things that she does is a testing that we do with a Q-tip. And sometimes you run the Q-tip on the face and the baby is like, oh my God.
Just a Q-tip.
Yeah, just a Q-tip.
So that's part of your standard intake process. And so where do you typically rub the Q-tip? And
I would go around the faces and you just set their reaction on that. And if you were going to map it, you start from the outside of the fingers and go like around and around them and their toes as well. And then she said, you have to check their oxygenation as a matter of fact when they come in. And so you got to use 2 fingers and 2 toes just to check to make sure that they have good oxygenation with that going on. So now imagine when you have the Q-tip on the face and the baby is reacting to that. And you don't
reacting as in kind of pulling away or
pulling away or crying even. Just and it was that sensation that got them all excited like that. Then you go cut right away. How much more trauma are you to the nervous system?
Right.
Yeah. So,
nothing else is going to work as well if you do not take the time before doing surgery. That's just that. And I mean, it brings us back to like the homunculus, right? And where our sensory motor pieces are in our brain, works in our body. Like that's the connection right there. We never we never think about it, or at least I didn't until, learning this, because we would you see a tongue tie, you do a function, it doesn't lift, and then you're like, okay, well, maybe get somebody, you suggest it, that was what we did before. Things were suggested in order to get the child ready. And then, you see them one post-op and they go on their way. But that's not how it works, especially in pediatric dentistry. You're seeing this child from infancy till we have 30-year-olds. They don't leave. They want to stay, So you see everything. You see everything.
And especially for me, because I started doing infants for breastfeeding support, like laser tie releases, way back, I want to say 2006, 2007. And so, and at that time, they had trouble breastfeeding, and we just, all right, laser there, we cut it. And the nurse right away, and you felt good. And 6 months later, they're not feeding properly. It's time to get solids in, and they're not able to get that in. And so now it's so different. That's the thing about this field. It's evolving and you keep learning. You cannot stop learning. So I get it when people get frustrated. However, again, it goes back to your mission. Why are you doing this? I see these kids now, the ones that we've done differently on, and you can see how they're thriving, and you can see the difference between them and their other siblings, and even they've had releases as well. And then you're going like, okay, thank you, Lord, I'm doing something. I can sit down. I don't see them being on that spectrum. Of course, it's not just what we do. Obviously, there's multifactorial and life outside.
Mm-hmm.
We just kind of help them minimize compensations that they're making so that they could be better adults.
That's so well said. And for anyone, again, on audio, not video, you could see Lynda's face light up when she talked about those ones that she's helping. And you could see, as you're saying, there's something in you, the light in you, the calling for that. You could literally, your whole energy changed as you started to see. And then as you were talking about the siblings that didn't get the help, you could kind of see, you feel sort of disappointed that those people aren't. It just shows that you feel this in your soul. And I say that often, that it is something that when you start experiencing this, it can't not speak to you and you can't unsee it. Yeah. I do feel sometimes in hearing you speak, though, I think a lot of this, and I don't mean this as a criticism, it's just kind of the reality. It's not even anyone's fault specifically, maybe the system, the greater system, but not any specific doctor's fault.
Right.
It's a billable service to do that release, right? What you're talking about, I mean, how do you even begin to bill for that? And you don't have to disclose exact numbers of things, but just like, how do you even, we're not rewarded in what we do. Physicians especially, but even in dentistry, we're not rewarded for our diagnostic time. We don't even have diagnostic codes. We have treatment-based codes, right? So how do you handle that part of it? Because that is a real part of it. There's people listening who may want to do this, but may just think, I don't know, I get paid X for a release, and that's so much more work and time and energy that I'm not getting paid for or don't know how to get paid for. So what would be some of your advice to people who are liking what you're saying and are interested in this, but just don't know how they could make a practice on it?
It's very difficult. And for a lot of it is a labor of love. Because if you were to, again, when I say it's priceless to see that child thriving. So part of your pay is the fact that you're going to bed feeling like you did your best that day. And so what we've done, which I think is helpful, is that we bundle them into therapy programs.
Okay.
So we sort of, if we were to put them individually or what we even assign costs to them, it might be like so prohibitive that people may not do it. So something like the baby lays bundles before they get the releases, we thought this is important for them. It's important for us because it makes us more successful. So we sort of kind of put a number to it and say, okay, you get bundles of 3 at a rate that is much less than if you were going to get them one after the other.
Okay.
I think that's been helpful.
Yep.
When we see them, their release fee in our practice includes 3 post-op checks. Okay. And with those 3 post-op checks, we also putting the baby lays in it. That's now additional, and the munchie, and a big munchie without additional costs. Again, it goes back to what you're feeling like you want to get out of this. And then, because it's not always the money in the bank. And I do understand it and say respectfully because we're all running businesses. But when they come for that 3-month check, we're guiding their growth, baby ortho, like Krystle calls it. But we're now into that. We're sort of kind of doing almost an exam fee. And when they come for that, they're supposed to bring their baby munchie. And we also do a baby lace treatment at that appointment. It's not an additional fee. And then we also go through milestones. So we're looking to make sure, okay, nasal breathing, is it time for them to start eating? And what are they eating? What kind of foods are they feeding them? So you sort of kind of reinforce why you're having them do all these things, but they didn't do it for their other kids anyway. And obviously they can see the difference anyhow, but then you're reinforcing why it's important to do that. Sometimes they have trouble. Okay, my mother-in-law wouldn't let me feed them this and that. It was okay, bring grandma in, we'll tell grandma and sort of kind of educate grandma on why it's important to allow you to do this for your child. And then we're also going to, when teeth come in, what to do before they come in and what to do as they're coming in and things like that. So it really is supposed to be from liquid to solid, then mush. for in terms of their feeding. But most parents don't know that. They said, okay, right after from liquids, they should go to mush first before they go to solid. So and that's not the way that it's supposed to be, because then getting that solid is important, one, the chewing reflex and the development of the jaws as well.
Yeah. So we're focusing on the value and the outcome versus the procedures. And so the bundling of these therapies and the treatments help us as well, you know. But again, it does take, once they're in it, it's almost like they're realizing they're getting a whole lot more than what they paid for. And a lot of parents who maybe they had releases done elsewhere, they're like, well, they didn't see me again after. And you guys are talking about even seeing me some more and doing this and doing that. They're like, oh, okay, you know, making a better understanding of why this happened in the first place and why just releasing is not going to be a magical tool.
And how have the outcomes been?
Amazing. It's like doing it this way, and in a sense, making the laser therapy non-negotiable, making the follow-up with the munchie and all of that non-negotiable. Like, I mean, moms are now, you know, and if we go on our YouTube channel, it's like we have parents have the last word. That's where they're talking and they're just like,
I'll put a link to that. That'll be great. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Yeah.
I can breastfeed now. Like, I don't have to use a nipple shield. I, you know, like I didn't realize I needed to do, it was a lot of work, you know, they'll be as honest as possible.
Yeah.
I feel it's like I have a baby, I have a new baby. I have, you know, the things that they say, it can't be quantified. It's really difficult to quantify, but they, you know, it has to be the lifestyle changes, the quality of life changes that we're going off of, knowing that we're on the right steps.
And even for as a provider as well. And in those days, in those first days when I would test it, when I first started doing the baby releases before I had this protocol, I would text them in the middle of the night just to see how they're doing. And most night everybody's up and, oh yeah, we're having trouble. They're doing this, they're doing that. You know, I'm like, okay, you breastfed you were here, so you're good. But nowadays, when I text them at nighttime, they'll say, oh yeah, you're crying a little bit, but you know, he's sleeping. Or the next day they send me photos that they just back to themselves. We had a photo shoot in the office about 2 weeks ago, and one of the moms, they had the release the day before, and I was like, I don't know if this was a good idea. So in my head, I was ready that she was not going to come for it. But now the baby came with her, and baby was just like, I'm playful. I'm going, we took yourself surgery yesterday. You know, so, but when you get the nervous system ready, then it's able to take on that trauma that you've just inflicted on the baby and handle it appropriately.
Yes.
So it's all about the nervous system. And we'll keep saying it.
And you know what keeps the reference to my episode with Roger Price, I knew loosely what evidence-based medicine was, but I couldn't have defined it. And he referenced it, and it's from David Sackett, a physician, and it was in the mid 70s. And people think when you say evidence-based medicine, people think, oh, it was in a journal, right? It was in or they did a randomized control trial and it was published. That is not evidence-based medicine. I don't know how it's been distorted into that being it, but what you two are doing is the definition of evidence-based medicine / dentistry. And that's because it is 3 circles equal in size of clinical judgment, relevant scientific evidence, and patients, or parents in this case as well, values and preferences. So what, and where in that Venn diagram where all 3 intersect is the evidence basis. So if you are just looking at one study and you want to go out there and say, well, this study was done, so this is what it is, you are not practicing evidence-based medicine or dentistry. You two are beautifully incorporating all 3 of those circles, and that has been abundantly clear through this discussion that you take all three of those things. You have tremendous knowledge in the science and the actual data side of things. You have amazing clinical judgment. You're constantly reevaluating your patients, looking at what works and what doesn't work. And you're so in tune with what it's doing to your parents, or how your parents are receiving it or able to implement this, and how the kids are able to withstand and implement this. Yeah. That is evidence basis. So I say that especially because I know people hear some of the things that you all are doing and say, that's not evidence-based. No, as a matter of fact, it is the essence of evidence-based medicine and dentistry. And I mean that wholeheartedly. And again, all I have to go do is go look up. There was a 96 article, I think, in the British Medical Journal that had those circles in it and was by Sackett, but it had been about 2 decades prior when he first started talking about those 3 areas. And the other part of that is each of those circles, obviously the centers where they all overlap together, but as in a Venn diagram, they overlap with one another just as 2 circles, right? So there's all these parts where you have to, and that is where I feel get practitioners who go in and just do it a certain way all the time, because either that's what they are taught or that's what works best in their systems. Even if there is evidence basis for what they're doing, that is not practicing comprehensive evidence-based dentistry.
Absolutely.
And I really wholeheartedly mean that. This has been, I mean, first of all, the time has absolutely flown by, and you two are amazing. I mean that wholeheartedly. I mean, really, you guys, what you do is just, you're doing God's work. You guys are just, you're out there, you're at the forefront of this. You've taken a lot of arrows, and yet you're still so positive, and you're still so driven for these patients and these families, and you don't let the criticism get you down. And it's so admirable. I've learned a lot in knowing you and meeting you and hearing you. And then today I've learned so much myself. The fact that you're so open to sharing this with everybody else and willing to just keep fighting for these patients. I love it. I love everything you're doing. I love everything you stand for. And I'm so appreciative that there are people like you. And for the 100th episode, I mean, come on, this was absolutely perfect. Yeah, I can't thank you enough.
It's our absolute pleasure. We really appreciate your kind words. Oftentimes, you know, it's done. We don't know. We're just doing. And I was one of those critics and skeptics. And
me too. Me too.
You know, she was on the 3rd row.
I was on the 3rd row of the roller coaster. When I was like, what are we doing? Like, can't we just get to do stuff? And honestly, I'm truly just blessed. I'm really blessed to have this like crazy mad scientist here behind me to say, no, this is how to do it. And then just see it. Like I'm seeing it every single day. I'm seeing these parents, I'm seeing these kids, I'm interacting with them. One of them that he couldn't sit in the chair to do anything. And just yesterday, I see him just for his normal checkup, and he's like, I'm the smartest one in my class. He's doing just this Muay Thai, showing me his Muay Thai moves. And he could not, I was like, how are we going to do anything? And we've done treatment for his smile is beautiful. His face is beautiful. Oh my goodness. So it's like you see it, you feel it, and you're just like, first of all, sometimes we're like, what are we doing? What's happening here?
Yeah.
But in the ways that we're helping these kids, I know that is making a difference for them. And some of our older kids that come in that are like, because you guys talked about certain things, this is why I'm going into even learning more about it. It's like,
that's it. That's the cycle right there. I mean, that is it.
Yes. So it touches me even more because, again, this is someone I was just focused on, just treating kids and just doing what I know that I learned and doing it quickly versus just stopping, slowing down, and really just like thinking through. It's a lot of critical thinking, a lot of, and it keeps you alive, to be honest. It keeps you young and excited, I think, us dental nerds here. So
yeah, what we do every day is hard. It's a grind, in a lot of ways. And I think the people who are the most fulfilled in what they do find a greater purpose in it than just the procedure.
Yeah,
I really do believe that. I mean, the procedure, I don't want to say it gets old because every patient's new and unique and different. It gets rote, I would say, and it becomes a little bit mundane, and you don't understand maybe the purpose quite as much. When you are doing what you both are doing and what I was fortunate enough to be doing with my patients, it doesn't get old. It literally doesn't. It doesn't mean there aren't headaches and stresses in your day, of course. And the business, right? I mean, of course, it doesn't mean like everything is like lines up. You're seeing kumbaya and like there's no stress anymore. That's actually, in a lot of ways, there's more stress. I think I should say that openly.
Right.
That being said, when you're doing it for such a high purpose, and you see, like you just said, with that, again, your whole face lit up when you were talking about that little guy that's coming in now who couldn't sit still, and now he's doing Muay Thai and he's bragging about being the high level of his class.
Yes.
Like, what is better than that? I mean, what is right? I mean, at the end of the day, can we ask for any more? That we have a gift to be able to change a life in that fashion? So for people out there who might not agree with exactly the way that you might do it or I might do it, how could you argue with the fact that you are, the technique, the timing, great. We can have academic discussions on that all day long. To argue with the fundamentals of this and the principle of it, to me, I just don't understand. And I think it goes back to what you both said, which is you just kind of have to do that to protect yourself if you're not willing to, right?
And we thank you as well, like even for you having this platform,
breath of fresh air.
a breath of fresh air, reaching across the aisle.
Right.
It's really, really important. It's so important. And we were so grateful because this is how we learn. We learn from different kinds of professionals that aren't dentists. They were allied health providers. There were, researchers, there surgeons, neurologists, pulmonologists, all types of geniuses in their own right who haven't been listened to, and they're just putting the pieces together and connecting the dots. So you having this platform where somebody can do that, inspire them to then say, you know what, I'm ready. I want to do this is so important. Yeah. So we thank you for that.
We know from your work that some of your colleagues have started to change.
Oh yeah.
Which is a good thing. It's a good thing overall. Actually, there's one we know, actually, one of his patients was asking on Facebook, should I do a lip tie release? And we were surprised because I'm like, okay, maybe he's getting religion now. Right. So
that it never existed.
That's a good thing. He's trying to do better for his patients, and we commend him for that. So
yeah, that's the thing. Is it is this is my I felt that purpose with my patients for a long time, and now I still do. Again, in patients we treat in the residency, I now feel it at an even higher level with helping colleagues see it so they can help their patients and I do really try to bring everyone together. And I get a little bit from both sides, good and bad, as being kind of the middleman. And I'm okay with that. I think I'm doing my job. If I've got everybody, no one's looking at it as I'm taking sides, and no one's looking at it as I'm the enemy, so to speak. I'm kind of in the middle of it, and I'm willing to call out whatever I see for the benefit of these patients. And I'm willing to learn and be critical of myself and the way I've done things. And I just try to keep that balance to raise awareness, really. And it's not for everybody. I get that. At the same time, it's for a lot more people than I think a lot of people realize. And as people hear this and hear your story and what you all are doing, it's just going to open people's mind to a whole nother level. I can't thank you enough.
And we're not necessarily asking people to do it.
Right.
Get
Thank you.
Awareness for yourself, and then be able to help the patients make the good decision. Don't be that provider that when they come to you and tell you, oh, look, my child is breathing through their mouth, and then the noisy breathing or the restless sleeping. Don't be that provider that's, it's just it's going to provide up.
They'll outgrow it.
Just say, you know what, I've heard about this. I don't know too much about it, but there are people around who do know about.
Here are the people.
Here are the people.
Go to these
go to these people and find out. Or take us up on, hey, let's have lunch. Explain to me why you're doing this and doing that. Why are you treating a 10-month-old?
Right. Because it's so foreign to people initially. It really is. It's like, that's crazy. We didn't learn it. And so I get it. It doesn't sound appropriate until you listen to the why and all the time and energy that you're putting into this and all the science behind it. And then you start to say, as I said before, well, that's evidence basis right there. I mean, that is the purpose. So I thank you two so much. Doctors Lynda and Krystle Dean-Duru, amazing stuff. This was so great. And 100 for 100. That was 100% on the 100th episode. That was awesome. You guys are the best. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Doc Podcast. Be sure to visit theorthocoach.com to get access to ADA CERP recognized CE courses or to schedule a private one-on-one coaching session with me. Also, if you know of someone who would make a great guest for this show, or if you'd like to be a guest yourself, please email me at drmike@theorthocoach.com. And be sure to join the Doc community on Facebook for more great content. Thanks so much for listening, and always remember, you have been blessed with the ability to do amazing things.